Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Good morning, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Palestine Remembered. Today, we're not going to talk about Palestine, though we've got a Palestinian on the show. We're going to talk to some wonderful Australians who are running for the National Tertiary Education Union. And joining us today, Anastasia Kanyeri, Andrew Beitzel, and a dear friend of our shows, Fahad Ali. Good morning, guys.
Hey, Nasser. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for giving up some time and sharing your stories, but also what you're trying to do with the National Executive there at the NTEU. Now, Fahad, you've been a long-time friend and participant in the show. Introduce the crew to us and tell us a little bit about what's going on.
I guess to start off, I'm a research assistant and a casual academic at the University of Sydney, and my background is in genetics. And I've been a member of the NTEU, the National Tertiary Education Union, for a number of years. I've always been a unionist, but unfortunately, one of the sad things about working in universities is that for people like me, as a casual academic, there's virtually no job security, and the conditions are quite bad. So we have a problem, I think, in our universities, but also within our union. And so when Anastasia got in touch with me to let me know that she was running for General Secretary of the NTEU and asked me to be her running mate for national president, I thought this is a fantastic initiative. And I guess just to sum up in a few words, what we're trying to do is trying to bring democracy back to the union. And what we're trying to do is put power back in the hands of university workers to fundamentally change the nature of the sector so that we can win back conditions, pay, and jobs.
Anastasia, why don't you share with us your story and how you're on this ticket?
I've been an activist for a long time, doing predominantly, like a lot of my work has been around Aboriginal deaths in custody, around border violence and refugee rights, and other sort of anti-racist work. And I started getting involved in the NTEU. I mean, I've always been an NTEU member, but I started getting seriously active in probably about the 6 months leading up to the pandemic. Started trying to connect with some delegates, get some health and safety stuff going on, and also began a casuals network at La Trobe Uni, because as Fahad has alluded to, precarious workers in the university sector are particularly underserved by our current union structures. Then from there, I got elected to my branch and also to National Council, which is the supreme democratic decision-making body of the union. And basically, in my experience in kind of progressing up the union ranks, what I learned was that I started to see some answers to the questions that I had around why things felt so stale and why there was such a lack of agility and action and wins from the point of view of a rank and file member. So from the point of view of an ordinary university worker who's a member of the union and worried about my working conditions and those of my colleagues. And I started to see some of the decision making going on and think, okay, I think I understand some of the problems. And also the further that I went in this work, the more that I thought, there's actually no solution but us. Right? That ordinary members ourselves only have ourselves to look to solve these problems. So that's how we came to this ticket and to this project, to really quite drastically reshape the future of our union.
Brilliant. And Andrew, bring you in. You're running for National Assistant Secretary.
Yeah, that's correct.
Not a little job either. What's motivated you, Andrew, to run?
Well, before I begin, I want to say that I'm speaking from the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal people in Brisbane, Meanjin, and I myself am an Indigenous man of Niganya descent from the Toms family. And so it's great to be on a show like Palestinian Remembered, because Indigenous sovereignty and Palestinian sovereignty are both the same causes, and I want to sort of extend solidarity out to Palestine, and because it's from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Absolutely, Andrew, and thank you very much for that.
But what motivated me really was I guess the main thing that I've sort of organised in the tertiary sector would be in 2019, I organised against a lecturer at Griffith University who was teaching a course on missions, and she was saying that missions prevented genocide in Australia, which is very, very wrong. And so I organised a bunch of grassroots action, Indigenous students and elders up here, and she retired. So that's kind of, I've got a long history of organising up here in my community, just like in the left community, and I just sort of think that I've kind of hit a point in my life where it's like I got this job I got a job at UQ, which is where I work. I'm a fixed term staff member, and I kind of got this job by accident. Where I am in my life is that I'm sort of like, well, I need to sort of do things that are a bit more stable. And I ended up sort of getting involved in the NTEU and very quickly realised that the NTEU was not a very good union. And I sort of thought, well, there's a great opportunity with this campaign, and I've got a long history of organising grassroots campaigning, and I just thought, well, it makes sense to join and it makes sense to try and make a difference. So why not?
Brilliant, Andrew. Well done. One of the things, I went to university in the mid-late 80s. Student activism was already dying out. My very last bit of my last year, we started demonstrating against HEX, the concept that we were going to have to start paying for university. What was Gough Whitlam's wonderful gift to Australian students was free tertiary education. No longer did you have to be a blacksmith. If your father was a blacksmith, you could now go to a university. Universities today are businesses. Degrees are a product of that business. The Vice Chancellor now is a CEO of a business unit and has to report daily. The impacts are stupendous. Firstly, in the quality and caliber of education, but also the impact it has on the teaching and the quality of student learning. Before we go into too much of that, and that's just as a background, coming back as an academic, what does that mean for you, having gone through your activist journey? Being a student, now you're an academic, life must be pretty tough.
Being an academic now has given me a very, very different view of some of my student days. Back as a student, I sometimes would struggle to understand why, it took so long to get some of my assignment feedback, or why some of the assignment feedback I got didn't seem particularly in depth. And I realize now as an academic, it's because we just aren't resourced appropriately to do that. So one thing that I see quite often is, when I'm teaching or when I'm marking assignments, I'm not paid adequately for the work that I need to do. And that's really sad, because I love what I do. I love my job. I love teaching. I think it's a fantastic, career. Unfortunately, if I'm given 15 minutes to mark an essay and it takes half an hour to properly read and grade it and provide feedback, I'm not getting paid for that half hour. So that inevitably means I need to make a decision between providing free labor to the university, or alternatively taking a burden upon myself of like time, energy, and that's a really unhealthy place to be in. So one of the things we're saying is that if staff had adequate conditions, if we have proper pay, if we had job security, that necessarily flows on to the quality of teaching and learning, because we'll be able to provide better education simply because we're better resourced. And we really think that that's one of the central pillars of like a good tertiary education system.
And sorry, because by the way, just when Fahad's talking about these miserable working conditions, these are not impoverished institutions, right? Like, these are not institutions don't have enough money. You were talking about how the vice chancellors operate as basically CEOs, and they are on multi-million-dollar salaries. And that's when you don't, not even counting all the money spent on consultancies and all the other senior executives. So these are incredibly wealthy institutions that are registering these massive surpluses. So, even apart from the question of the federal government's failure to defend the sector, even with the money that the sector currently has, the treatment of staff and students is just unacceptable. And again, this is where we have to ask questions about the efficacy of the union. It is literally the job of a union to balance out the scales between bosses and workers. And you need to do that fearlessly and relentlessly and with a strategy and determination. And we're just not seeing that. And I think that really crucially, when we're looking at the tally sheet right now of how the union has performed over the past, well, decades, really. And it doesn't wash out. And we can't keep going like this for the sake of ourselves and also for the sake of our students. There's no way that we can watch these conditions just continue to erode. I have little kids myself. My daughters are 5 and 8. And I would, I guess, like them to be able to think about going to university one day. I mean, if you think about 10 years from now, when that 8-year-old might be able to think about going to a university, I honestly cannot imagine what working and learning conditions might look like in universities at that point. So it's a scary situation.
Indeed. Thanks so much, Anastasia. And Fahad, Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it's like in a university today? And I mean that from the perspective of, look, I can't understand why anybody wouldn't be a member of a union. What's the percentage of staff members that are actually members of unions? But also, do you have, and I say this terribly, I've got some friends who are in the building industry, and many of them are reaping the benefits of all of the union struggles, remembering the 8 hours of work, 8 hours of play, and 8 hours of rest. That they were hard-fought victories. Bosses didn't give that stuff up willingly. If it was up to a boss, they'd send you down a coal mine with a canary and say, when the canary stops singing, Bob, start running because you're about to die. That why anybody wouldn't be a member of a union just beggars belief. But in your university at UQ, do you have that level of resistance? Are people are they all members?
It's quite low across the board. I mean, like union density over the last 30 years or so has really declined ever since neoliberalism really came in. UQ, I believe, it's about 15% across the board.
So 15, only 1 in 6 people is a member of the NTEU. So these are staff members, faculty members who are suffering from lack of tenure, insecurity of payment, expected to do work over and above what's possible. As Fahad was just saying, it takes 30 minutes to grade an essay, he gets paid for 15 minutes. So he has to make a choice. Does he spend 15 minutes in unpaid work and deliver an outcome to a student who's hopeful of creating a better future of themselves, and unpaid labour? I mean, the universities are part of the whole, the supermarkets not pay staff hundreds of millions of dollars in wages. The universities are now caught up with this.
That's correct.
And 5 in 6 staff members of these higher education don't want to be members of unions.
Yeah, well, I mean, the problem I think is that when I to give you my context, when I joined, the NTEU was kind of like, the best way to describe it is it's kind of like a bit of like a rundown house, I suppose. It's really not in a great shape. Now, if you look at the current leadership, they're doing fantastically. But we're rank and file members, and we've kind of seen it from the bottom. And we can tell you, like in my workplace, there's got to be 300, 500, probably nearly 1,000 people working in my institute at UQ, and there's about 8 members in the union. It's incredibly low.
Wow, that's not even 1%. You were saying 15% beforehand.
Oh, yeah. And then when it comes to actually trying to organise, so I can give you my perspective. So I'm a delegate with the NTEU, and we don't get member lists from the national leadership. So I can't tell you who those 8 members are because the union won't tell me. And it's really crazy. And well, it's not even crazy, it's deliberate, because the leadership in this union is really kind of against organising and against grassroots organising and against kind of democratic processes. And they kind of do what they can to hamstring these sorts of things from actually growing. So someone like me, rank and file, who's fairly pretty radical, who's trying to organise their workplace and trying to organise workers, they're not going to support someone like me. And there's been many cases which Anna and Fahad can go into where caucuses have been downplayed. I think Fahad actually they issued a wage increase, and that was dismissed by the leadership, which Fahad can go into. But yeah, it's really hostile, and the people that are in the union are kind of, it's not their fault, like the organisers in the union, it's not their fault that things are this bad. It's that they are so under the, I guess, tyranny, let's be honest, of the leadership, that they can't do their jobs and they can't, work without, they can't, because they're constantly under threat, because it's really hostile, and there's so much internal bullying and hostility, and it's not a great place it's not much of a union at all, really.
No place to be. We're joined today by Anastasia Canieri, who's running for National General Secretary, Andrew Weissel for National Assistant Secretary, and Fahad Ali for National President. Fahad, usually NTEU elections are not contested. So you've thrown a spanner in the works. That's a good Palo thing to do. Andrew just spoke about some of the reasons that he's running. Fill us in on some of the reasons you've chosen to run.
I mean, we've spoken about all the reasons people should be members of their union, and I have, a very long involvement in the union movement. Even before I was a worker in the university and before I was a member of the NTEU. I have been at this university for a long enough period of time that I know that I want a career here and I want to build upon that. And I'm still at a very early stage I'm an early career researcher and I've been working, for 4 years. That's not comparatively long. When I see my colleagues who are 10 or 20 years after finishing their PhDs, still stuck in casual positions, whenever job advertisements go up, some people don't get interviews. Sometimes there's 1,000 applicants for a single role. And sometimes, and quite shockingly, I heard at Sydney University, they advertised a lectureship in biology that they didn't fill with anyone at all, because the university realized that, oh, actually, we've got all this video content we've made the casuals create during COVID. We're just going to use that in place of hiring someone. So when I see stuff like that, I realize that my future, my career, this is my dream job, that is slipping away, and it's going to be completely impossible for anyone to get to that, to climb the academic ladder. And I don't want that for myself. I think that I owe it to my colleagues, and we all owe it to each other to prevent that kind of future from emerging. And unfortunately, what I see in the union at the moment is almost this kind of wishy-washy liberalism of like, oh, we'll just ask the government to help us out, or, oh, we'll just have backroom chats with vice chancellors about, and that's not the way to do it. The way we got to do it is we've got to build member capacity. We've got to democratize the union and encourage people to be proud of what we're doing, to take action and to fight. And that's the only way we're going to actually save the sector. And so I just don't see that reflected in the current leadership. And, as you said, it's a very Palo thing to do, to throw a spanner in the works. We're trying to light a fire under the, underneath the current leadership. And, hopefully we will be successful in that.
Well, fingers crossed. Anastasia, I was actually in a meeting earlier on today, and it really, it hurts my head. My father was a shop steward, and, we grew up union proud. Why anybody wouldn't be a member? I've heard, I'm on the outside, some of the terrible stuff that's been spoken about the NTEU around racism and bullying and transphobia. I mean, is there any wonder they're only attracting 1 in 6 of their people?
Well, yes, 100%. And I think the other thing that's really crucial when we talk about this is, have people been asked? You need to ask people to join the union. And the vast majority of workers in the sector, even workers who've been working for years, have not been asked, not even once, let alone multiple times by people that they trust, with good arguments, with proven techniques. I guess, a lot of what you're alluding to, I think, is the need for a pretty massive sweep of radicalization in all of our organizations and institutions. And to do that, we need a bunch of things. Firstly, we need those institutions to function. So a big part of our critique, the critique that Fahad and Andrew and I are putting forward, is just to do unionism well, just to make the databases work, make the website look okay, make the comms read well, make people actually answer their phones and return phone calls and emails, really basic, just good practice stuff, having excellent, robust financial governance, good HR procedures, just do a good job of your literal job. Then the second part is switching to really strong organizing structures. I was lucky enough with some comrades to do some training recently by a school called Organising for Power, which is an international school that runs these free training workshops where you can learn how to conduct organising conversations, how to plan majority petitions and majority actions and towards massive strikes. So not obviously running strikes when you have the kind of density that we have talked about is really tough. Also, another topic that we can get into is the NTEU's extreme reticence about using its $11 million strike defense fund to actually pay workers who are going out on strike. But let's set that aside. So once you're doing excellent these aren't sequential necessarily programs. But the other thing that you've alluded to, which is incredibly important, is that you need a union that you can be proud of. And for that, you need a union that handles bullying in ways that are robust and transparent and accountable. You need a union that is strongly and unequivocally opposed to racism and colonial violence and transphobia. You need a union that has excellent internal democracy so that members, whether or not members agree with decisions that are made by the union, they always know how those decisions are made and they always understand that democratic procedures were followed. So we need to be able to be proud of our institutions, and our institutions need to proudly prosecute a progressive agenda to improve the world. We can't see a union simply as a kind of not particularly effective insurance for some of the most privileged of workers. And just to be really clear here, so I'm a casual worker, so I'm not in the upper echelons of the university sector, but I'm a white settler from a middle class background. I'm and cis and straight. I really am about as privileged as you can get in terms of a working class person entering the workforce. And the union's still not managing to speak to any of my needs. So and I'm by no means representative of the majority of our workforce. So is it any wonder that we're seeing such a loss of faith?
The problem is definitely with the communications, the comms, because if you're not working on the weekend, that's because of the union. If you're getting time and a half or double time, that's because of a union. If you're getting a paid holiday, that's because of a union. If you're getting sick pay, that's because of your union. That's because of some union fought for you. And if for whatever reason you're not a member of your union, in this instance, we're talking about the NTEU, but if you're not a member of a union, you're listening to this show, find out who represents you as a worker and join the union, get active, participate, protect your rights and those of your workmates, and get everybody else unionized as well. Andrew, I wonder if you might want to comment. 1,000 staff members, maybe 8 union members. I mean, if that's not a reason for the entire elected leadership to hang their heads in shame and hand the keys over, could there be a more compelling case?
I think so. It also speaks, I think, to Indigenous members, because there was quite a high-profile case of an Indigenous lecturer basically she had a case of racism at UQ, and the national leadership basically said to her, "We're not going to fight for you. We're not going to," because she was taking them to court, and they basically said, "We're not going to do anything for you. Sorry." And so she ended up leaving the union, and she ended up leaving a job. So they basically they just drove her out. I've spoken to her about this. So she said to me, you go and blast them. So it's kind of like, it's no wonder as well. Not just like non-Indigenous workers, but for Indigenous workers too. I mean, what incentive is there to join when someone so high profile is thrown under the bus? Then what if somebody's not very high profile? Well, you're not going to get any treatment, are you? And it really speaks, I think.
That's the actual calling card of the union.
Yeah.
Our solidarity. Together we are stronger.
Yep.
Together we are stronger. If there's only 8 of you out of 1,000, only 8 of you are members of the union, how can you expect protection? How can you negotiate when you've only got 8 members in a whole university? I mean, they should hang their heads in shame.
They should. That's just my institute. The university has about 6,000 staff members, and I think, don't quote me, but I think it's only a few hundred members at UQ. There's not a lot of members up here. I mean, they should hang their heads in shame. It's really kind of, going back to 2020 with the jobs protection framework, that was, and then there was, cases of transphobia and basically, supporting gender critical feminism, which is transphobia by another name. And there was the case with the Indigenous lecturer. It's just endless, and it's just, this is a leadership that we have. And it's really a symptom of the fact that the NTEU is a neoliberal union, and it's a managerial union. And it's not like, I've done work with the MUA up here. I haven't been a member of the MUA, but I was the coordinator for Anti-Poverty Network Queensland, which was an unemployed workers kind of union. And we did work with the MUA. And I know Paul Peterson and Bob Carnegie up here, who are incredible staunch comrades. It's nothing like their union. It's nothing like that solidarity and that comradeship that they have and that staunchness that they have when they fight. It's totally the opposite. It's quite right-wing. It's quite managerial. It's neoliberal. It's very much like, just go for enterprise bargaining and everything's great. And if you can't, and, the opposite in candidate to Anna is one of his big platforms is to just lobby the government. And it's like, well, we're a bloody union. We don't need to lobby the government. We're workers. We've got worker power. And there's 824 members at UQ of the NTEU with an approximate density of 11%. So there you go. It's very, very small.
It's time to shake the joint up, Andrew.
Well, I can tell you, and I can reassure you and all the listeners that everybody else seems to think that too in the NTEU. I think we're scaring the hell out of these people, and good, because it's time that they were scared. And like you said, you call a scab a scab. So
Can I just jump in very quickly? I think that Andrew just hit the nail on the head there, but I've had so many conversations with people over the past couple of weeks. Just recently, I was in Meanjin, Brisbane. I was talking to workers at UQ, at QUT, at Griffith about the conditions they face and the issues that they have with the union. And every single university worker I speak to has told me the same conditions exist at their institutions. And they have told me that they are unhappy with the direction of the union. It's a widespread recognition. And there are people who have left the union because of how bad it is. Now, I am always going to be the person to say, join your union. If you're not working in the tertiary sector, you can jump on right now, australianunions.org.au. It'll help you find exactly what union you should join. But, there have been so many people that have told me, I'm going to sign up to the NTEU if you win, or I have signed up because I heard you were running. Like I said, I think people should join the unions in any case, but the fact of the matter is that the current leadership has caused so much discord with the working base of our sector that people refuse to have that association. And I think that's really shameful and something really ought to be done about it.
The neoliberalism that Andrew spoke about earlier, they've turned the word union into a bad word. We've got a couple of minutes left, Fahad. Why don't you give us the big pitch on why your ticket here should get your vote?
Oh, I reckon this is a bit of a big one for just one person to answer, but I reckon we've seen the sector in crisis. We have known this has been going on for years. We've recently come through a pandemic, but it was bad before then. It's been bad for so long. And really, we have to ask the question, with the current leadership, with the current incumbency, if we know it's bad and we know it's getting worse, where have they been this whole time? And so what we're suggesting is that we actually need a different direction for our union. We need fresh vision. We need organizational experience. We need people who live and work on the front lines of our universities, who have the understanding of the day-to-day realities that rank and file members experience. And we are going to take that experience, that vision, and that energy to the leadership of our union, and we're going to build a democratic union that is going to mobilize members, and it's going to win back our conditions, jobs, and pay. And that's something to believe in.
Now, Anastasia, the whole point of this show was to get everybody riled up and ready and prepared to vote for yourself and Fahad and Andrew. How can they support you?
So voting will open on the 10th of August and will close on the 5th of September. You will get a ballot mailed to you from the AEC. Yes, a paper ballot, and you need to fill it out and walk it to a post box. However, we don't think the only thing that members can do is voting. We believe in organising, and we believe in the power of workers to shape their destinies. And we have a whole lot of things that you can do to start organising your workplace and creating change for a new NTEU. So we have a website called anewnteu.com. So that's ANEWNTEU.com. where you can sign up to our contact list, print out posters. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do there. So please do get in touch.
And listeners, if you go to the podcast, we'll have those links there for you as well. So you can go to Palestine Remembered and find those links, and make sure you get out and vote for Fahad and Anastasia and Andrew. Wonderful team ready to represent you at the NTEU. Thanks so very much, guys. If there's no other reason to vote for this crew, it is because the current leadership can only manage to get 1 in 6 people to sign on, which doesn't make them leadership. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Anastasia, running for National General Secretary, Andrew Beisel, who's running for National Assistant Secretary, and Fahad Ali, who's running for National President. Guys, been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. What a wonderful conversation.
Thank you much. And once more, solidarity with Palestine. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to share the podcast. And remember, there's never been a better time for a free Palestine.